Have you ever felt there is a difference between who you truly are and the image you project to the world? As if you were always trying to meet external expectations, but deep down, something was missing? This feeling is not uncommon. In fact, Carl Jung described this sensation as a clear sign that your unconscious is trying to communicate with you. When we ignore this inner voice, we get stuck in an endless cycle of dissatisfaction, repeating patterns that always lead us to the same place: empty relationships, choices that do not represent us, a constant sense of disconnection from our own lives. And all of this happens because we stop valuing ourselves, recognizing who we truly are, and acting in alignment with that truth. Self-appreciation is not just a motivational concept, but a deep process of self-acceptance. And this does not only mean embracing the qualities we like, but also recognizing those aspects we avoid, hide, or even deny. Fear, insecurity, past mistakes, all of these are part of us, and as long as we pretend they do not exist, we will continue to feel incomplete. Jung called this hidden part the shadow, and the more we resist looking at it, the more it manifests in ways that harm us, through impulsive choices, toxic relationships, and self-destructive behaviors. But how do we know we are ignoring this part of ourselves? Have you ever had a strong intuition about something and simply ignored it, only to realize later that you should have listened? Or felt such an intense internal conflict that you could not explain it rationally? These are ways in which the unconscious sends us messages, trying to guide us toward a more authentic life. When we ignore these signs, we end up living on autopilot, without truly understanding why we repeat certain patterns or feel that emptiness that never seems to be filled. Choosing to value yourself means, first and foremost, being willing to look within. It means beginning to notice which aspects of your life are not aligned with your true essence. And this is not an easy path because it often requires facing uncomfortable truths about ourselves. However, it is through this process that we find freedom. When we stop seeking external approval and start listening to ourselves, we discover that peace does not come from pleasing others, but from living in harmony with who we truly are. If you have ever felt out of place, as if you did not belong anywhere, know that this feeling is a call to look inward. The emptiness we try to fill with external achievements, relationships, or the recognition of others never disappears because the true solution lies in something only we can offer ourselves: the recognition of our own worth. Throughout life, we learn to hide parts of ourselves that do not fit others' expectations. From an early age, we are conditioned to show only what is accepted, repressing our fears, weaknesses, and deepest desires. This process creates what Jung called the shadow, everything we reject about ourselves, and that, for this reason, remains hidden in the unconscious. The problem is that ignoring this part does not make it disappear. On the contrary, it grows and begins to influence our actions in subtle ways, without us realizing it. The shadow manifests in different ways. It can appear as insecurities that prevent us from taking action, the fear of being judged, self-sabotaging behaviors, or even in the way we react to people around us. Have you ever been deeply irritated by someone and not understood exactly why? Many times what bothers us in others reflects something we deny in ourselves, and the more we run from these truths, the more they become obstacles to our growth. Deciding to value yourself means being willing to look at this shadow and understand it. This does not mean passively accepting everything, but rather recognizing these hidden parts, understanding them, and integrating them consciously. When we run from the shadow, it controls us unconsciously. When we face it head-on, it becomes a source of learning and transformation. This process requires courage. Facing your own shadow is uncomfortable because it means questioning the stories you tell yourself. Stories like, "I'm not good enough," "I need to change to be loved," or "I can't be who I really am because I won't be accepted." These limiting beliefs were built over time, but they only continue to exist because they have never been challenged. And the only way to free yourself from them is to confront them directly. That is why self-appreciation is not a superficial process. It is not enough to simply say, "I love myself," or try to convince yourself that you have value. You need to act in accordance with this decision. This means changing patterns, abandoning harmful habits, and often reevaluating the relationships and situations you allow in your life. Because when you truly value yourself, you no longer accept living in a way that contradicts this truth. True transformation happens when you understand that you no longer need to run from yourself. When you realize that the shadow is not your enemy, but an essential part of your journey. By accepting and integrating it, you release an immense amount of energy that was previously wasted trying to hide what has always been within you. And at that moment, something powerful happens. You begin to feel more whole, more authentic, and for the first time, truly free. When you decide to value yourself, something inevitable begins to happen. You realize that not all people and situations deserve your time and energy, and this realization changes everything. Throughout life, we get used to accepting certain relationships and environments simply because we believe we have no choice. We maintain exhausting friendships, persist in relationships that diminish us, and involve ourselves in situations that drain our energy, just because we think this is part of life. But when you start valuing yourself, this dynamic changes completely. You begin to recognize the impact that the people and circumstances around you have on you, and you realize that you can, and should, choose better. Carl Jung said that the people around us reflect aspects of ourselves. This means that the relationships we cultivate mirror how we treat ourselves internally. If you constantly find yourself in relationships where you are not valued, it may be a sign that, deep down, you have not yet learned to value yourself. This is not about blaming yourself, but rather seeing it as an opportunity for change. Because when you truly understand your worth, you no longer accept less than you deserve. Saying no to what does not nourish you is one of the greatest acts of self-worth you can practice. But this is not an easy task. Many times we are taught that setting boundaries is selfish. We fear disappointing others, being rejected, or ending up alone. But the truth is, there is no greater loneliness than being surrounded by people who do not respect or value us. When you start standing up for yourself, something curious happens. Many of the people who are around you begin to drift away. Some do not understand your new stance, while others are simply uncomfortable because they were used to a version of you that accepted everything. This may be painful at first, but it is a clear sign that you are transforming. And this transformation attracts different people. When you start respecting yourself and putting yourself first, your energy changes, and the world responds to that. New connections arise. People who truly value you enter your life, and most importantly, you begin to feel a peace that once seemed impossible. This process does not happen overnight. Sometimes you might feel the urge to go back, to give in to avoid conflict, or to fit into others' expectations again. But every time you choose yourself, you reinforce the most important message of all: I am worthy. And this simple decision has the power to change your entire life. When you truly start valuing yourself, something extraordinary happens. Things begin to fall into place in a way that once seemed impossible. Suddenly, you notice that certain people enter your life at just the right moment. Unexpected opportunities arise, and situations that once seemed like obstacles start making sense. Jung called this phenomenon synchronicity, the idea that seemingly random events are actually connected by a deeper meaning. Synchronicity is not coincidence. It is a direct reflection of your internal state. When you live in disharmony with yourself, ignoring your emotions and following a path that does not resonate with who you truly are, your life feels full of resistance. Things do not flow. Everything seems harder than it should be. But the moment you choose to value yourself, something shifts. You start acting in alignment with your truth, and it is as if the external world adjusts to reflect this new energy. This does not mean that your life will suddenly become perfect and free of challenges. On the contrary, real transformation requires you to go through discomfort and change. But now, these challenges no longer feel like random punishments. Instead, they become opportunities for growth. You realize that difficulties always bring lessons, and that every choice made with authenticity brings you closer to a life aligned with your true self. Many people go through life feeling like they are always in the wrong place, surrounded by the wrong people, doing something that does not fulfill them. But this reality is not unchangeable. Jung said that we project onto the outside world what we do not recognize within ourselves. If your life is full of conflicts, perhaps it is time to look inward and ask yourself, What part of me is allowing this? When you ask this question sincerely, you begin to notice patterns that previously went unnoticed. And as you become more aware, you start making different choices. You stop insisting on relationships that do not make sense, distance yourself from environments that drain your energy, and stop sabotaging yourself. This new stance creates a ripple effect. With every choice you make in alignment with your true self, new doors open. The opportunities that once seemed distant start appearing because now you are ready to receive them. Synchronicity does not happen by chance. It is the result of a deep internal process. The external world responds to the frequency we vibrate internally, and when your frequency changes, your reality changes as well. The most incredible thing is that once you start noticing these signs, everything begins to make more sense. You realize that you were never truly alone, that there was always something greater guiding you. But until you chose to value yourself, you simply were not listening. When you decide to value yourself, you realize that this is not an isolated moment, but rather a continuous commitment. It is not enough to awaken to your own worth once and expect everything to transform automatically. Personal growth requires dedication, which means questioning old patterns, facing internal challenges, and, most importantly, developing self-confidence to keep moving forward, even when circumstances seem to be against you. Many people believe that valuing themselves simply means adopting a more positive attitude or convincing themselves that they are special. But this change goes far beyond words or affirmations. It is a deep process of restructuring one's identity. This is because, throughout life, we accumulate limiting beliefs, ideas like, "I am not enough," "I need to change to be accepted," or "I cannot trust myself." These beliefs are like invisible chains that keep us stuck in destructive behaviors and relationships that do not serve us. Valuing yourself means challenging these beliefs. It means realizing that many of the stories we tell ourselves are not absolute truths, but merely conditioning that we can question and transform. This process does not happen overnight, and it can often be uncomfortable because it means letting go of identities we have carried for years. But every time we choose to trust ourselves more, transformation becomes more natural. Jung said that growth is not linear but cyclical. It happens in a spiral. This means that at times, you may feel like you are regressing, facing the same challenges as before, or reliving old insecurities. But in reality, you are seeing these issues from a new perspective, from a higher level of awareness. What once seemed like an insurmountable obstacle is now just another step in your evolution process. The most important thing to remember is that every choice counts. Every time you respect yourself, every time you set a healthy boundary, every time you walk away from something that does not resonate with you, you reinforce to yourself that you are worthy of a better life. In the beginning, these changes may seem small, but they create a powerful cumulative effect. Little by little, your mindset shifts, your actions change, and the world around you responds to this new energy. But this path is not without challenges. There will be moments of doubt when old patterns try to pull you back. People who are used to your previous version may resist your change. You may even feel alone on this journey. But it is precisely in these moments that self-confidence becomes essential. Because the more you stay committed to valuing yourself, the stronger you become. And the most remarkable thing? Over time, this confidence becomes natural. What once felt like a conscious effort, respecting yourself, listening to yourself, prioritizing yourself, becomes simply part of who you are. You no longer need to convince yourself of your worth, because it is already deeply rooted within you. And this internal shift not only transforms your life, but also the impact you have on the world. As you strengthen your self-worth, you begin to notice changes not only within yourself, but also in the world around you. The relationships that once drained you lose their place. Opportunities that once seemed distant begin to appear, and the sense of peace and clarity becomes increasingly present. This transformation does not happen because the world has changed. The world remains the same. What has changed is the way you position yourself, and this internal shift creates a ripple effect on everything around you. Carl Jung said that when an individual transforms, they not only change their own life, but also influence the environment around them. Your choices, your energy, and your stance become a reflection of this new awareness. The people around you begin to notice this change. Some feel inspired, while others may resist or drift away. And that is part of the process. Not everyone is ready to face their own truth, and your transformation may be uncomfortable for those who have not yet taken that step. But that does not mean you should stop. On the contrary, the more you stay true to your path, the more you become a living example that it is possible to live authentically. And this authenticity is powerful. Without needing to convince anyone, your presence alone becomes an inspiration for those who are also seeking something greater, but do not yet know where to start. Over time, you realize that other people's opinions no longer hold the weight they once did. Before, you might have shaped your choices to meet external expectations, to be accepted, or to avoid conflict. But now, your decisions come from a much deeper place, a genuine alignment with who you truly are. This freedom does not mean that challenges have disappeared, but rather that you now have the clarity and strength to face them without losing connection with yourself. And then, something fundamental happens. You stop seeking external validation. Not because you do not care about others, but because you understand that your worth does not depend on anyone's approval. This does not mean you become indifferent, but rather that your actions are no longer guided by the fear of judgment or the need for acceptance. Instead, your choices are based on what is true for you. This shift affects not only your personal life, but also your purpose and your contribution to the world. When you value yourself, you begin to ask, how can I live a life that truly has meaning? What do I want to build? What impact do I want to leave behind? And these questions, which once seemed abstract or distant, now begin to make sense. You realize that your growth is not just for you, but also for those around you. The most fascinating part is that this journey has no final destination. Valuing yourself is not something you do once and then you are done. It is a continuous process, a path that requires presence, awareness, and daily choices. Some days will be easier than others, and that is normal. The important thing is to remember that every step, no matter how small it seems, is part of a greater movement. And in the end, you realize that you no longer need to fit into patterns that do not make sense for you. You no longer need to seek outside yourself for what has always been within you. Because when you decide to value yourself, you discover that real change was never in the external world. It was always within you.